"You're not worth my time," Claire Whitmore said, and the whole boardroom laughed just softly enough to pretend it was professional. Nathan Reed stood at the far end of the glass table with a coffee stain on his sleeve, a worn leather folder in one hand, and the calm eyes of a man who had learned long ago that dignity does not need a microphone. Outside the 43rd floor windows, downtown Chicago glittered under a gray morning sky, all steel, rain, and ambition, but inside Whitmore Global's executive boardroom, the air felt colder than January off Lake Michigan. 12 directors sat beneath a row of recessed lights, their tablets glowing, their watches expensive, their patience thin. Nathan had been allowed into the room by mistake, or so they thought. A maintenance supervisor had vouched for him. A junior assistant had whispered that he was the single dad from the loading dock. Someone else had said he fixed old delivery vans on weekends. None of them said his name like it mattered. Claire Whitmore, 36, brilliant, beautiful, and feared in every room she entered, stood at the head of the table in a white blazer sharp enough to look like armor. Her company was minutes away from signing a $400 million acquisition of a medical software firm called Northbridge Systems, a deal that would put her face on business magazines and silence every rival who had called her too young, too cold, too ambitious. Then Nathan had walked in with a quiet warning. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, respectful, steady. "You need to stop the signing." A few heads turned. One director actually chuckled. Claire did not. She looked him over slowly, from his scuffed work boots to the folder pressed against his chest. "And who exactly are you?" "Nathan Reed." "That wasn't my question." A small ripple of laughter moved around the table. Nathan swallowed once, not from fear, but from the old ache of being measured by fabric, salary, and shine. He thought of his 7-year-old daughter Lily eating cereal that morning at their tiny kitchen table, her knees tucked under her, asking if Daddy would be home before bedtime. He had promised yes. Men like Nathan kept promises. Even when the world did not keep its own. "I work in facilities," he said. "And I found something in the backup server logs." Claire's eyes narrowed. "You accessed company servers?" "No, ma'am. I repaired the cooling unit in the archive room. The screen was already running diagnostics." "So you looked at something you didn't understand?" "I understood enough." "Enough?" Her smile was clean, expensive, and empty. "Mr. Reed, I have attorneys, analysts, auditors, and a board full of people who get paid to understand things you could not begin to explain." Nathan did not move. The rain tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere near the wall, a speaker hummed with the faint buzz of a conference line waiting to connect New York. "You're not worth my time," Claire said. "Security can walk you out." The chairman leaned back, satisfied. The CFO smirked into his coffee. A young assistant lowered her eyes as if watching kindness get punished had become part of her job description. Nathan opened the folder, but only halfway. "Before I leave," he said, "ask Northbridge why their encryption certificate was renewed 6 hours after their chief engineer died." The laughter stopped. Claire's smile disappeared. Not slowly. All at once. The CFO's cup froze halfway to his mouth. The general counsel lifted his head as if someone had called his name from a grave. Nathan looked at no one with pride, no one with anger. He simply stood there, quiet as a church after the final hymn. And for the first time that morning, every powerful person in the room understood that the man they had dismissed might be the only one trying to save them. Claire Whitmore did not speak for 3 full seconds, and in a room built for power, 3 seconds felt like an earthquake. The rain moved in thin silver lines down the glass behind her, blurring the Chicago skyline into a watercolor of towers and headlights. Nathan Reed kept his hand on the folder, not opening it further, not performing, not reaching for attention. He had said what he came to say. Now the truth had to decide whether anyone was brave enough to follow it. "What did you just say?" Claire asked, her voice quieter now, stripped of its polished edge. Nathan looked at her directly, but gently. The encryption certificate for Northbridge Systems was renewed at 2:17 in the morning last Thursday. The chief financial officer, Graham Ellis, gave a dry laugh that landed nowhere. That is public routine maintenance. Certificates renew all the time. Nathan turned his eyes toward him. Not with a dead engineer's credentials. The room stilled again. A board member near the far corner shifted in his leather chair. The general counsel, Denise Carver, slowly closed the acquisition binder in front of her as if the paper had become too heavy to touch. Claire lifted one hand. Everybody stop. No one moved. No one even pretended to check a phone. Mr. Reed, she said, forcing his name to sound official instead of inconvenient, explain exactly what you think you found. Nathan took a breath. He could feel every stare pressing against him, the old familiar weight of judgment. These were the rooms where men like him were expected to replace light bulbs, not challenge billion-dollar deals. He thought of the archive room 2 floors below, the stale air, the blinking red temperature alarm, the server cabinet humming like a tired refrigerator. He had gone there because someone ignored a maintenance ticket. He had stayed because one line of text on a diagnostic monitor carried the name of a man Nathan recognized from a condolence notice pinned near the employee cafe. I saw a remote authorization trail, Nathan said. 3 entries. Same credential. Same internal key. But the timestamp came after Dr. Miles Fenwick's death notice was released. Death notice? Claire asked. Denise answered before Nathan could. Miles Fenwick was Northbridge's lead security architect. Reported heart failure at home. It was in their disclosure packet. Graham's jaw tightened. A tragic loss, but irrelevant to the purchase. Nathan looked down at the folder, then back up. With respect, sir, a dead man signing security renewals is never irrelevant. The assistant by the wall, a young woman named Paige, finally looked up. Her face had gone pale, not with fear, but with recognition, as if she had heard the same warning whispered inside her own conscience and had been too afraid to say it aloud. Claire noticed. Paige? The young assistant swallowed. There was a supplemental file from Northbridge this morning. Mr. Ellis told me not to route it to legal because we were already behind schedule. Graham snapped his head toward her. That is not what I said. Paige lowered her eyes again. Nathan did not rescue her with noise. He simply opened the folder and placed one printed page on the glass table. It slid no more than 6 inches, but every person watched it like it had crossed a canyon. Claire picked it up. The first line was technical. The second line was worse. The third line carried the name Miles Fenwick in black ink, beside a timestamp that made the room feel suddenly airless. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the city. Claire's confidence did not break, but something inside it bent. Where did you get this? She asked. From the system nobody important bothered to look at, Nathan said. There was no bitterness in his voice. Only grace, quiet and devastating. The backup log. Denise stood slowly. Madam Chief Executive Officer, we need to pause the signing. Graham pushed back from the table. This is absurd. We are letting a facilities worker derail the most important acquisition in company history. Nathan closed the folder with care. No, sir, he said. You almost let pride do that. And once again, the boardroom froze, not because Nathan had raised his voice, but because he had not. Claire held the printed page like it weighed more than the entire acquisition binder. Her eyes moved across the timestamp again, then back to Nathan, and for the first time since he had entered the room, she looked at him not as an interruption, not as a uniform, not as a man standing too close to a table he was never invited to join, but as a person who might have brought the truth before it was too late. Call Northbridge, she said. Graham Ellis rose halfway from his chair. Claire, think carefully. She did not look at him. I am. Denise Carver reached for the conference phone and tapped the secure line. The speaker gave 2 soft tones, then began dialing New York. Around the table, directors who had laughed only minutes earlier now sat with the stiff posture of people trying to remember exactly what they had said. Nathan stepped back from the glass, giving the room its space. That was his way. He never forced himself into places where pride had built locked doors. He simply stood near the wall, beneath a framed photograph of Claire shaking hands with the mayor, his work boots leaving faint rainwater marks on the polished floor. Paige watched him with quiet gratitude. "You did not have to say anything," she whispered, barely audible. Nathan answered without turning his head. "Yes, I did." The line clicked, and a man's smooth voice filled the room. "Evan Mercer, Northbridge Interim Chief Operating Officer." Claire leaned forward, both palms flat on the table. "Evan, this is Claire Whitmore. We are pausing final signature pending clarification on a security credential issue." There was the smallest pause on the line. Small enough for most people to miss. Nathan did not miss it. Neither did Claire. "What sort of issue?" Evan asked. Denise slid the page in front of Claire. Claire read from it slowly. "A renewal request tied to Dr. Miles Fenwick at 2:17 in the morning last Thursday." "That must be an automated artifact," Evan said. "Our systems do that." Nathan closed his eyes for half a second. Not from arrogance. From disappointment. Lies had a sound. They moved too quickly, too neatly, like shoes over ice. Claire glanced toward Nathan, and he gave the smallest shake of his head. "Evan," she said, "was Dr. Fenwick's credential active after his passing?" "I would have to ask engineering." "Then ask them now." Another pause. This one was longer. Graham leaned toward the speaker, voice sharp. "We are minutes from closing, Evan. Tell her this is routine." Denise's eyes lifted slowly from her notes and fixed on Graham. Claire saw it. Nathan saw it. The room saw it. Outside the glass, rain thickened, tapping harder now, as if the city itself had leaned closer to listen. Evan cleared his throat. "We can send a letter of technical assurance after closing." Before closing, Nathan said quietly. Everyone turned. Graham almost laughed, but could not find the courage. Claire did not stop Nathan this time. "Why?" she asked. Nathan looked at the phone, though the man on the other end could not see him. "Because after closing, the liability becomes yours." That sentence settled over the table like ash. Denise whispered, "He is right." Evan's voice cooled. "Who is speaking?" Claire looked at Nathan. "Someone who noticed what my team missed." The word surprised even her. They carried no apology, but they carried respect, and in that room, respect was rarer than money. Nathan reached into his folder again and removed a second page. "There is more," he said. Graham stood fully now. "Enough. This is becoming a circus." Nathan placed the second page on the table. "No, sir. A circus has noise." His eyes remained calm, almost sorrowful. "This is what silence looks like when it finally brings evidence." Claire took the page. Her face changed before she finished reading it. The board members leaned forward one by one. Paige covered her mouth. Denise whispered something no one caught. At the bottom of the page was an internal routing note, forwarded from Northbridge to one executive at Whitmore Global 3 days earlier. The recipient name was Graham Ellis. For one long breath, Graham Ellis looked less like a chief financial officer and more like a man standing in a doorway he had sworn was locked. His name sat at the bottom of the page in plain black letters, not dramatic, not loud, just undeniable. Claire stared at it, then at him, and the temperature in the boardroom seemed to fall another 10 degrees. "Graham," she said, "why was this routed to you?" Graham adjusted his cufflink, though it was already perfectly straight. "Because finance reviews acquisition exposure." "You know that. Then why was legal not copied?" Denise asked. Because it was preliminary. Preliminary? Denise's voice sharpened. It references unauthorized credential activity connected to a deceased security architect. Graham gave her a look built from years of corner offices and closed-door power. Denise, do not make this theatrical. Nathan stood still near the wall, his folder now resting at his side. He did not enjoy watching a man come undone. There was no pleasure in it, only the heaviness of consequences finally finding the correct address. Claire placed the page on the table with careful hands. Evan, she said toward the speakerphone, did Northbridge send this routing note to Mr. Ellis? The line remained quiet. In that quiet, Nathan heard the entire boardroom change. Expensive chairs stopped creaking. Pens stopped tapping. Even the soft ventilation above them seemed to hush. Evan, Claire repeated. Answer me. The voice from New York came back thinner than before. A packet was sent for executive review. Graham leaned toward the phone. That is enough. We can discuss documentation offline. No, Claire said. The word was not loud, but it carried the weight of a door closing. We discuss it now. Paige, still standing by the wall with her tablet pressed against her chest, looked as though she wanted to disappear. Nathan noticed her hands trembling and spoke softly, not to the room, but to her. You kept the file copy? Paige nodded once. Graham turned on her. Paige, be careful. Nathan stepped half a pace forward, not threatening, not forceful, just present. She is being careful. Claire's eyes moved from Nathan to Paige. Send it to Denise. Now. Paige touched the tablet with shaky fingers. A small chime sounded from Denise's laptop. Denise opened the attachment, scanned the first page, then the second. Her face went pale in the clean glow of the screen. There are risk annotations, she said. Someone flagged potential fraud exposure and recommended delaying signature pending forensic review. Claire slowly turned toward Graham. You told me all diligence was clean. Graham spread his hands. It was a judgment call. Every deal has noise. If we stopped every acquisition because of a technical irregularity, this company would never grow. Nathan's voice entered gently. Growth without truth is just a taller building on a cracked foundation. The oldest board member, Harold Pike, who had been silent since the beginning, removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Son, how exactly did you know what you were looking at? There it was, the question they should have asked before laughing. Nathan glanced at the floor, where a faint reflection of the city shimmered beneath the table. Before facilities, I worked cybersecurity for a hospital network in Milwaukee. Claire blinked. You were an engineer? Systems integrity. 12 years. Then why are you repairing cooling units in my archive room? The question came out too bluntly, and Claire seemed to regret it the moment it left her mouth. Nathan did not flinch. Because my wife got sick. Because insurance did not cover everything. Because after she passed, my daughter needed a father home by dinner more than she needed a man chasing titles. No one moved. No one smiled. The rain kept falling. Nathan's voice remained quiet, but it carried farther than any speech in that room. Some people stepped down because they failed. Some stepped down because love asked them to. Claire looked away first, not from weakness, but from the shame of understanding too late. Graham exhaled sharply. This is sentimental nonsense. Denise turned her laptop toward the board. No, Graham. It is evidence. On the screen, the forwarded file showed a final note beneath the risk warning, a note added from Graham's own account, hold until after closing. Do not circulate. The words on the screen did not shout, but they did what shouting never could. They made every excuse in the room look small. Hold until after closing. Do not circulate. Claire read the sentence once, then again, as if discipline alone could keep the disappointment from reaching her face. Graham Ellis stood frozen beside his chair, his tailored navy suit still perfect, his silver watch still shining, but the authority around him had begun to drain away like water through a cracked pipe. "That is taken out of context," he said. Denise Carver folded her hands. "Then give us the context." "We were managing timing." "Whose timing?" Claire asked. Graham looked at her, and for the first time, he did not answer quickly. Nathan watched the silence stretch across the glass table. He had seen this kind of silence before, in hospital billing offices, in funeral homes, in school meetings where people used polite words to hide hard truths. Silence could be cruel when it protected the powerful. But it could also be holy when it gave the truth room to stand. "Claire," Graham said, softening his voice, "you know what this acquisition means. The market expects it. The board expects it. Your father built this company by moving when others hesitated." Claire's jaw tightened at the mention of her father. Everyone in the room knew the name Richard Whitmore still hung over the company like a bronze statue no one dared remove. He had been a legend in Chicago business, a man who turned a small logistics outfit into a national technology empire. He had also taught Claire that mercy was useful only after victory. "Do not bring my father into this," she said. Graham leaned forward. "I am trying to protect what he left you." Nathan lowered his eyes. That sentence landed wrong. Not because it was loud, but because it was dressed as loyalty while smelling like fear. Paige sent another file to Denise. Denise opened it, and the board watched her expression harden. "There is a side letter," she said. "Performance bonus acceleration upon closing." Harold Pike slowly put his glasses back on. "For whom?" Denise did not look away from the screen. "For Mr. Ellis." The room seemed to lose its air. Graham's face flushed, then steadied, the way polished men steady themselves when the mirror finally tells the truth. "Standard incentive structure," he said. "Approved compensation." Claire's voice was barely above a whisper. "You pushed me to sign while hiding a fraud warning because closing triggered your bonus." Graham looked around the table, searching for one friendly face and finding only reflections of his own collapse. "I pushed this company toward growth." Nathan spoke gently. "No, sir. You pushed a locked door and called it a future." Graham turned on him with a sharp laugh. "And you? You expect us to believe you are just a humble father who wandered into a server room and saved the day?" Nathan did not answer immediately. He thought of Lily's lunchbox on the kitchen counter that morning, the purple one with the sticker peeling off. He thought of the overdue electric bill tucked behind the microwave. He thought of all the times men in clean shirts had mistaken quiet for emptiness. "I do not need you to believe anything about me," he said. "I only need you to read what is in front of you." Claire looked at him then, and something in her expression softened under the weight of grace. Not admiration yet. Not trust yet. But recognition. A man had walked into her boardroom with nothing to gain and everything to lose, and he had done it anyway. Denise closed the laptop. "We have enough to suspend signature and initiate an independent review." Harold nodded. One by one, the other directors followed. Graham sat down slowly, not defeated by volume, not exposed by spectacle, but undone by a single page, a quiet man, and the dignity he had underestimated. Claire turned toward the speakerphone. "Evan, Whitmore Global is suspending the transaction pending forensic audit." Evan began to object, but Claire cut him off. "Send every security record by 5 o'clock Central Time, or our next call includes federal regulators." She ended the line. The small click sounded final. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Claire turned to Nathan Reed, the facilities worker with rain on his boots and truth in his folder. "Mr. Reed," she said, each word careful now, "why did you bring this to me instead of going public?" Nathan looked toward the window, where the clouds were beginning to thin above the city. Because public shame is easy, he said. Giving someone a chance to do the right thing is harder. And in a room trained to worship power, that answer felt almost impossible to understand. Claire did not dismiss the board immediately. She let the silence remain, because some silences are not empty. Some are mirrors. Around the table, directors who had built careers on fast decisions now sat in the slow discomfort of having been saved by a man they had barely allowed to speak. Graham Ellis stared at the closed laptop in front of him, his face tight, his shoulders rigid, but nobody looked to him for permission anymore. Denise Carver quietly gathered the printed pages and placed them into a legal folder marked Privileged Review. Harold Pike exhaled through his nose and looked toward Nathan with the tired humility of an old man who had seen pride cost more than money. "Mr. Reed," Harold said, "I owe you an apology." Nathan gave a small nod. "Thank you, sir." "No speech?" Harold asked, almost sadly. "No, I told you so." Nathan glanced at Claire, then at the long table shining beneath the cold lights. A man who needs to humiliate others after telling the truth does not love the truth. He loves winning. The sentence settled gently, but it reached every corner. Claire lowered her eyes. She had spent years learning to win. She had learned to enter rooms without blinking, negotiate without softness, cut weakness out of her voice until no one could use it against her. But now, standing in front of Nathan Reed, she wondered whether strength without grace was just another kind of fear wearing expensive shoes. Her phone vibrated on the table. A message from Investor Relations. Then another from Legal Operations. Then 3 from the communications team. The outside world was already pressing against the glass. Claire ignored them all. "Denise," she said, "secure the documents. Paige, cancel the press call and notify the audit committee. Harold, I want an emergency governance session in 1 hour." Each person moved quickly, grateful for instructions that sounded like order returning. Graham stood. "Claire, I expect a private conversation before you damage my reputation." She turned to him slowly. "Your reputation is not my first responsibility. After everything I have done for this company. After what you hid from this company." Graham's mouth opened, but the boardroom door opened first. 2 members of corporate security stepped in, quiet and professional. No drama. No roughness. Just procedure. Denise looked at Graham with measured calm. "You are being placed on administrative leave pending review. Please surrender your company devices." Graham looked around the room one last time, searching for outrage on his behalf. He found none. When he passed Nathan, his voice dropped to a bitter whisper. "You think they respect you now? By tomorrow, you will still be fixing air conditioners." Nathan looked at him with steady eyes. "Maybe." Graham paused, thrown off by the absence of anger. Nathan continued, "But my daughter will still know I told the truth." That was the moment Graham had no answer for. He left under the soft hum of the lights, and the door closed behind him with a sound so small it felt enormous. Claire remained standing at the head of the table, but her posture had changed. The armor was still there, yet something human had begun to show through the seams. She looked at the faint water marks from Nathan's boots near the carpet edge, then at his worn folder, then at the man himself. "You said you worked systems integrity for 12 years, she said. "Why did your file say only facilities?" Nathan gave a faint, weary smile. "Because nobody asked for the rest." Paige, still near the wall, whispered, "I am sorry." Nathan turned toward her. "You did the right thing when it mattered." The young assistant blinked back tears, but he did not make a ceremony of her emotion. Grace never needs an audience. Claire stepped away from the head of the table and approached him. The room watched, uncertain whether they were witnessing a reprimand, a thank you, or something no executive handbook had prepared them for. "Mr. Reed," she said, "I was wrong about you." Nathan held her gaze. "Yes, ma'am." The honesty almost startled her. Then he added, "But you still have time to be right about what happens next." Outside, the rain finally began to break, and a pale line of sunlight touched the windows of the 43rd floor. The emergency governance session began 1 hour later, but Nathan Reed was not in it. He was 2 floors below the boardroom, standing in the narrow facilities office beside a dented metal desk, calling his daughter's school before the lunch bell. The room smelled faintly of dust, printer toner, and the lemon cleaner someone used too much of every Friday. A row of spare filters leaned against the wall. A stack of maintenance requests sat in a plastic tray. It was not the kind of room where powerful people came to look for answers, which was probably why Nathan felt comfortable there. "Hey, sweetheart," he said when Lily answered from the school office phone. "Hi, Daddy. Are you okay?" Her voice was small, bright, and worried in the way children become when life has taught them to listen between words. Nathan softened. "I am okay. I might be a little late tonight, but Mrs. Alvarez can pick you up, and I will be home before dinner. Promise?" He closed his eyes for half a second. "Promise." There was a pause. "Did someone at work get mad at you?" Nathan looked through the small office window toward the hallway, where executives had begun moving in urgent clusters, their polished shoes clicking across tile that he had helped repair last winter. "A few people," he said gently. "But sometimes doing the right thing makes noise before it makes peace." Lily seemed to think about that. Mom used to say quiet people can still be brave. Nathan's hand tightened around the phone. The ache came softly, like a hymn heard through a closed door. She was right. When he hung up, he stood still for a moment, letting the silence hold him. Upstairs, Claire Whitmore sat in a conference room with the audit committee, outside counsel, and 3 directors whose faces looked older than they had that morning. The preliminary review was moving fast. Northbridge had sent partial records. Those records did not clean the stain. They widened it. A dormant credential. A concealed vulnerability. A side communication chain. And behind all of it, the dangerous arrogance of people who thought a deadline could bury a truth. Claire listened as Denise laid out the findings. "This is not just a documentation issue," Denise said. "If we had closed, we could have inherited exposure across every hospital client tied to their platform." Harold Pike rubbed his forehead. "How much exposure?" Outside counsel answered carefully. "Potentially hundreds of millions, before reputational harm." No one spoke. Claire looked down at the table, remembering Nathan's words about a taller building on a cracked foundation. She had heard consultants speak for 90 minutes and say less. Paige entered quietly with a fresh folder. "Madam Chief Executive Officer," she said, still a little nervous, "facilities confirmed Mr. Reed's employment file. But there is something else." Claire looked up. Paige placed a printed resume on the table, recovered from an old internal application Nathan had submitted 3 years earlier for a security analyst opening. It had never been reviewed. The rejection reason was automated. Insufficient current corporate experience. Claire read the page slowly. Former systems integrity lead. Hospital network security. Emergency recovery after ransomware incident. Federal commendation for protecting patient data. She stared at the words, then whispered, "We had him here the whole time." Harold leaned back. "And we sent him to fix vents." Claire did not defend it. Defense would have been easier. Truth was harder. "Bring him upstairs," she said. "Please." The word "please" changed the room more than the instruction. 20 minutes later, Nathan stepped back onto the 43rd floor, still in the same work shirt, still carrying the same worn folder, but the people waiting for him no longer looked amused. Claire stood as he entered. So did Harold. Then Denise. Then, one by one, every director in the room rose to their feet. Nathan stopped near the doorway, uncertain for the first time that day. He had prepared for mockery. He had prepared for dismissal. He had not prepared for respect. Claire walked toward him, her voice quiet enough to be sincere. "Mr. Reed, we found your old application." Nathan's expression flickered, just once. "I figured it got lost." "No," she said. "We lost sight of what mattered." The room stayed silent, not frozen by fear now, but held by something gentler. Claire extended the resume toward him like evidence of a different failure, one that did not belong to Graham alone. "You tried to tell this company who you were," she said. "And we never listened." Nathan looked at the paper, then at the people standing before him. His voice remained steady, but softer than before. "Most people do not listen until the cost of ignoring gets too high." Claire nodded, and in her eyes there was no performance left. "Then help us listen now." Nathan Reed did not take the resume right away. He looked at it the way a man looks at an old photograph from a life he had folded carefully and placed in a drawer. There had been a time when titles mattered to him. Lead analyst, systems architect, recovery specialist. Words that used to sit beneath his name in clean blue letters, back before hospital corridors became his second home, before his wife's prescriptions filled the kitchen counter, before Lily learned to draw pictures quietly beside waiting room chairs. But grief had a way of rearranging a man. It did not always destroy him. Sometimes it simply taught him what he could live without. "I can help," Nathan said at last. "But I will not be used to make the company look good for a press statement." Claire accepted the correction without blinking. "That is fair." Harold Pike nodded. Denise opened a fresh notebook. Paige stood near the door, watching Nathan with the cautious hope of someone seeing a room change for the first time. Claire gestured toward the table. "Tell us where to start." Nathan stepped forward, not to claim the head seat, not to taste power, but because truth had work to do. He laid out the pages in a careful line. First, isolate every Northbridge data exchange from Whitmore systems. Do not trust the staging environment. Second, preserve the access logs exactly as they are. No cleanup, no optimization, no helpful edits. Denise wrote quickly. Third, contact every hospital client named in the Northbridge integration packet and advise a precautionary review. One director shifted uneasily. That could create panic. Nathan looked at him, calm but firm. So can silence. Claire's eyes lifted. The director said nothing more. Nathan continued, "Fourth, bring in outside forensic investigators before anyone internal touches the evidence. If the issue is real, people will try to make it look smaller. If it is not real, an independent record protects everyone." Harold exhaled. "That is a better plan than the one we paid consultants $250,000 for." Nathan did not smile. Good plans are usually not loud. They are just honest. The room moved around him now, not with the frantic energy of reputation management, but with purpose. Denise made calls. Paige routed secure notices. Harold contacted the audit chair. Claire stood beside Nathan, listening more than speaking, and each time she did speak, her voice carried less command and more responsibility. By late afternoon, the sky over Chicago had cleared into a pale blue washed clean by rain. Sunlight entered the 43rd floor and touched the glass table where the same people had laughed that morning. The same table now held evidence bags, legal folders, and paper coffee cups gone cold. At 4:36, Denise received the first confirmation from an outside forensic team. At 4:42, Northbridge's interim chief operating officer stopped answering calls. At 4:58, an email arrived from a senior Northbridge engineer using a personal account. Denise read it aloud, her voice tight. "I have been trying to report this for 2 weeks. Dr. Fenwick found the credential issue before he died. Management told us the acquisition could not be delayed." No one breathed for a moment. Nathan lowered his eyes, not in victory, but in respect for a man he had never met who had tried to tell the truth and had not been heard in time. Claire placed one hand on the back of a chair to steady herself. "We are notifying regulators," she said. "Tonight." Harold looked at her. "The stock will take a hit." Claire nodded. "Then it takes a hit." A faint sound moved through the room, not applause, not surprise, but recognition. Claire turned to Nathan. "You told me I still had time to be right about what happens next." Nathan met her eyes. "You do." She looked around at her board, her lawyers, her assistant, and the quiet single father who had walked in with rain on his boots and saved her from her own certainty. "Then here is what happens next," she said. "We tell the truth before the truth has to drag us." And this time, nobody laughed. By 6:15 that evening, the press release was ready, the regulators had been notified, and Whitmore Global's acquisition of Northbridge Systems had been officially suspended. The announcement was not polished into triumph. Claire refused that. It was plain, direct, and accountable. A potential security concern had been identified. An independent forensic review was underway. Client safety and data integrity came before market pressure. Those words moved across newsrooms, investor desks, and hospital administration offices before the sun had fully slipped behind the Chicago skyline. The stock dipped. Commentators speculated. Competitors whispered. But inside Whitmore Global, something steadier began to rise. Employees who had spent years lowering their voices around executives started sharing old concerns. Page submitted a proposal for anonymous reporting protection. Denise opened a full review of ignored escalation channels. Harold Pike called Nathan Reed the man who saved the company from a very expensive lie, and for once, no one corrected the simplicity of the truth. Nathan did not stay for the praise. At 6:42, he signed out at the facility's desk, picked up his old jacket, and hurried to the curb where Mrs. Alvarez waited in a blue minivan with Lily in the back seat. The little girl pushed the door open before he reached it. "Daddy," she called. Nathan crouched as she ran into his arms, her backpack bouncing, her hair smelling faintly of crayons and strawberry shampoo. He held her a second longer than usual. "You okay?" she asked. He smiled into her hair. "I am now." From the building entrance, Claire watched without meaning to. She had come downstairs to find him, carrying an envelope from Human Resources and a formal offer she was no longer sure how to present. Seeing him with his daughter changed the shape of the moment. In the boardroom, Nathan had seemed steady as stone. Here, kneeling on the sidewalk with a child's arms around his neck, he looked like what he truly was, a father who had carried too much and still chosen kindness. Claire stepped forward slowly. Lily looked up at her. "Are you my dad's boss?" Claire paused, then answered honestly. "I suppose I was this morning." Nathan stood, one hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder. "Miss Whitmore." Claire looked at him, then at Lily, then back at him. "Claire," she said softly. "Please." The city moved around them, horns in the distance, tires hissing over wet pavement, commuters rushing past with phones in their hands. But around the three of them, the evening seemed to quiet. Claire held out the envelope. The board approved an interim appointment. Director of Systems Integrity, pending whatever title you think actually fits the work. Full benefits. Flexible hours. And a team that reports to you, not around you. Nathan looked at the envelope but did not take it. "I need to be home for dinner most nights." "Then be home for dinner." "My daughter comes first." Claire nodded. "That is one of the reasons I trust you." Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, is that good?" Nathan looked down at her, and the decision in his eyes was not about money, not about status, not about proving anyone wrong. It was about stability. It was about respect. It was about a second chance arriving without asking him to abandon the first love of his life, the little girl standing beside him. He accepted the envelope. Claire let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Thank you, she said. Nathan smiled faintly. For accepting. For giving me the chance to be right after being wrong. Nathan looked toward the building, then back at her. That is what grace is for. Claire's eyes glistened, but she did not hide from it. Behind the glass doors, employees had gathered quietly in the lobby. Not to stare at a scandal. Not to watch a spectacle. They were watching a man they had passed for years without seeing. One by one, they began to clap. Softly at first. Then stronger. Nathan looked embarrassed, almost uncomfortable, but Lily beamed as if the whole city had finally discovered what she had known all along. Claire stepped back, giving him the moment instead of taking it. And as the applause filled the lobby and spilled gently onto the sidewalk, Nathan Reed did not raise his hand, did not bow, did not claim victory. He simply held his daughter's hand, standing in the golden evening light with quiet dignity, while the people who once overlooked him stood silent in their hearts and finally learned the meaning of respect.